A few weeks ago, I found a bunch of my old video games. Now, this was really exciting. I'd been an ardent gamer as a kid, but I'd say at least 85% of what I played was on handhelds. With the advent of the Nintendo Switch, which is technically handheld but more like a console in practice, my gaming habit fell away pretty quickly without any handhelds to hold me over. When I was a kid, or even in college, being able to carve out hours to play Portal or Overwatch was viable. With working and personal relationships and chores and other hobbies and making videos for you, I subconsciously jettisoned this old favorite pastime. To give you an idea of how long it's been, the last time I remember playing a game with any sort of dedication was probably Fire Emblem Three Houses in late 2019. But stumbling upon my DS's, yes, multiple, a light, a 3D, and a fat, and a trove of old games suddenly made this favorite of yesteryear doable again. I was overwhelmed with choice, unsure where to start, but once I booted up my 3DS and saw a virtual console copy of Pokémon Gold, my decision was clear. I knew it had to be done. I have several video game experiences in my life that I could say are uniquely memorable. Games like TF2, Sonic Heroes, Harvest Moon. Games that I played with such focus and at such pivotal moments that they feel like handprints on my psyche. Pokémon Gold is one of these. Pokémon was probably the franchise I was most dedicated to when I actively gamed. Blue was the first game I ever owned, and I played every generation pretty loyally until about 8, when I suddenly dropped off. Coincidentally, Sword and Shield came out about 2 months before I started my first full-time big boy job. But Gold, well, Gen 2 was my favorite, always was. In nearly 30 years of playing Pokemon, this hasn't changed. Something about its story, characters, design, etc. all speak to me in a way that the others just don't. It has the old school style of the Game Boy era without the absence of so many quintessential features that Gen 1 suffers from. Seemed like a perfect sweet spot between the old and new school for a long time, though it may be old as balls now. I'd played through it a few times, but the battery issues made relying on a typical cartridge difficult. But now I had a virtual console copy. Infinite possibility. I was so excited to play the game again, excited to play any game again, and I definitely had fun, but as time wore on, something was wrong. Again, I had a lot of fun, especially in the beginning. So much of what I remembered was just as great as my memory said, but a lot wasn't. I won't get into all the details, there are plenty of dedicated Pokemon channels who can do that for me, but a bunch of mechanical issues kinda soured the experience for me. Poor level scaling, tedious repetitive Team Rocket battles, being left without game mechanics that I'd grown accustomed to in later games, it felt lacking. By the time I reached Kanto, a part that was incredibly exciting to me as a kid, I felt kind of just burnt out and bored. I'd pick up my DS and play for a few minutes, only to think, I'm not having fun, and put it back down. I didn't have much eagerness to train or explore because there wasn't really much to do. And for literally the first time in my entire life, Gen 2 let me down. Horrible scene, I know. Something about this experience did hurt. Not like actual meaningful pain, but a sort of emotional stubbing my toe. I'd spent nearly 3 decades thinking this game was the pinnacle of Pokemon, and now I was just seeing it for what it was. A deeply flawed product of early gaming with plenty of bad parts I just easily ignored because I was a child. This is something I've come to experience a lot lately now that I'm in my 30s. I'll regain access to some heavily rose-tinted piece of my childhood, be it a show, a game, or a book, and once I've consumed it with an adult perspective, I'll come away thinking, this really isn't as good as I remembered it to be. Or worse, I'll think it kinda sucks. Nostalgia-based marketing has become a huge ploy in the 2020s. It feels like we're in an era where companies and brands are trying to make inferior products more palatable by wrapping them up in the labels of things we remember fondly. As I write this, Warped Tour has just announced it will be coming back in 2025, something that emo kids have long been yearning for. I have no question in my mind that tickets will sell out, but I'm annoyed about it. Despite still being held by good old Vans, I can't help but see this revival as nothing but an inferior, more expensive copycat who's just cosplaying the original event. Warped Tour was a nationwide event, spanning cities across the US and Canada, but the revival will only take place in 3 cities. 2 of which are in the mid to southeast coast. A day of ticket to Warped Tour in 2007 cost between $20 and $37, which is still only $30 to $56 today. Weekend tickets to the revived Warped Tour start at $150. This is before you factor in travel costs, hotel stays, food, souvenirs. If I wanted to go to my closest Warped Tour 2025, which is probably Orlando, I could end up spending over $1,000 just to make it happen. Maybe I'm just cynical, but something about all of this feels deeply insidious to me. It feels like whoever orchestrated this event saw the memes and the Facebook posts and the general constant stream of nostalgia for Warped Tour and 2000s emo culture, alongside the success of uber expensive emo festivals like When We Were Young, and thought, man, we could get these guys to pay any price for a taste of the past. And I guess that's why the idea of this being wildly successful irritates me so much. There's nothing wrong with wanting to relive happy memories to a reasonable degree, or even reignite what you see as a meaningful tradition. But the circumstances of a lot of these revivals just feel like extreme greed. It feels like we're being fire festivaled over and over again because we can't stop being nostalgic. Using a lot of social media has proven to be a big mistake for me, and one reason for that is how I now notice how obsessed we all are with the past. Every minute detail of what we imagine to be a better time is now being dug up and made into a sign of a bygone era. The default Windows XP wallpaper, the coming soon screen on Disney DVDs, paper Zoopal plates. If it was in the past and we have some vaguely happy association with it, it's viable nostalgia bait. I've seen some of these get passed around like the Facebook equivalent of the Village Bicycle, and they do numbers almost every time. I've touched on this in other videos, but it's not really rocket science to guess that a lot of this stems from being dissatisfied with our current way of life. I can't say I'm surprised. I live near a major metropolitan city and regularly pay as much as $8 to $9 for a cup of coffee. I wait for dirty buses that don't come on time, and I live in a state of permanent fear of doing anything that could result in me incurring medical debt. I'm not mad. I'm also not immune to nostalgia. It's why I played Pokémon Gold in the first place. I have such warm, happy memories from every single time I played it, but namely the first time. I remember it so vividly, being sat at the foot of my aunt's bed with my lime green Game Boy Color, drinking in every minute detail of this newly upgraded world that was suddenly before me. Everything seemed bigger, better, more colorful. I was happy beyond my wildest dreams, and I was also barely 6 years old. As a millennial, the one thing I own for free is living in interesting times. I got to experience pre- and post-9/11 society, along with the ability to view the before times with a glossy veneer that obscures all the ugly parts. It's all too easy to fall into the trap of looking back at the year 2000 and think that the world was everyone's collective oyster. You didn't have to take your shoes off at the airport, an ice cream cone cost $1, and everyone, everywhere, played Pokémon. That's a fact. This was truly the pinnacle of humanity, right? But that's the thing, it wasn't as great as I remember it, and it wasn't great for everyone. A lot of the things I take for granted now weren't even on the immediate horizon. Yes, a lot of things were worse. I never felt the compulsion to log onto Twitter. That was nice. I never had to see what people posted on Twitter. That was even nicer. But beyond the narrow scope of my childhood, things in that time still often sucked. Countries still went to war, people still lived on the street, violence and misery existed even when my eyes were being shielded from it. As I get older, I'm confronting this reality more and more. On some level, things have always been bad. But to be a little optimistic, there have also always been good things. At the risk of sounding like an enlightened centrist, this has more or less been true since the dawn of time? And I know what you're thinking. You cannot possibly be suggesting hunter-gatherer times had a meaningful amount of good stuff going on. And I get it, but I need you to consider that they never had to see a Cybertruck, okay? I'm not saying that all time periods are created equal, like, you couldn't pay me to live in medieval times, the historical period or the dinner show, but clinging to the past is keeping us in the past. Escapism is common when you feel like the world sucks, but if we're just spending all our time escaping, none of the stuff we're running away from gets fixed, and we just escape more. It's not just millennials, though. People of every age appear to be delving deeper and deeper into media consumption, further isolating themselves from other humans and disengaging with the consequential parts of life that remind them how bad things are out there. Nostalgia is one piece of this. We're trying to distract ourselves from our crappy present with a mostly fictional narrative of a past that never really existed the way we remember it. Doomerism is rampant for a lot of reasons, and this is just one extension of it. It's not wrong to want to be happy, but if we choose to only ever want to be entertained, only ever forget about the bad in the world, and only to find happiness in the past, it can take us to some dark places, all while we lose the chance to be happy here and now. To use my Pokémon lead-in, let's consider every time Game Freak has gotten so focused on rehashing Gen 1 that they ignored the chance to really innovate the series. Yeah. But that one cut you deep, Pokemon fans. It got me. I'll throw another hot topic in the mix, the Victoria's Secret fashion show. For some people, this one underwear commercial represents the pinnacle of 2000s pop culture. And I can see why it'd be fun to watch. There are pretty outfits, there's spectacle, there's celebrities, but I mean, it's still just a big underwear commercial. With the most recent iteration of it, we've seen people discoursing about the loss of the show's honor or whatever because fat models walk the runway or it's just not as glamorous, I guess. And I've seen people get heated about this, and it's like, man. And look, disclaimer, I get overly excited about silly things all the time. It's why I make useless commentary videos, okay? But we can't let these fictions of the past ruin our lives. Was the runway show really that great, or were you just in high school and enchanted by spectacle? While we're arguing about the honor of the Victoria's Secret fashion show, we're all forgetting that not long before these amazing shows, VS was exploiting prisoners to sew their products. This is another thing that nostalgia can do when we bury ourselves in it, get us worked up over meaningless fluff to the point that we miss the real problems. The past is fun and all, but we can't let it be used to make our lives worse. Be it through pointless internet arguments, spending ridiculous amounts of money on inferior products, or ignoring any chance to make the present even better than what was just because it's hard to think about. This isn't even getting into the fact that nostalgia is often weaponized to spread some of the most evil propaganda imaginable, but I'll leave that to a political channel. So, how did we get here from Pokémon? Good question. I'd love to know. Well, let's start with the title. What did Pokemon Gold teach me about nostalgia? For one, it's an unreliable narrator. It often glosses over the bad, clinging on to happy associations to make things seem better than they are. It also taught me that while there's disillusionment to realizing some of the things you loved in the past weren't so great, there's also the benefit of realizing, hey, I can see it now. I'm older, but wiser. I've learned so much, and it's taught me how to have a more full, accurate view of things. Even Pokemon games. And hey, nostalgia isn't all bad. A lot of stuff I've revisited was still good, sometimes even better with age. And the imperfections of the past don't mean that the time spent with them wasn't worth it. I've said over and over again that media and products and events can seem better than they were because of positive associations, but I think we do well to focus less on the products that we think made us happy and look for the situations and people and places that actually did. Like, Lunchables didn't make me happy. They tasted like wet socks. But my grandmother would buy them for me when we went out on our weekly supermarket trips. They make me think of her and the time we spent together. My bike itself didn't make me happy. It was the trips I'd take down to the path by the ocean, or riding around the block to visit my friends, or just the freedom of being 10 and having all the hours in the world to cycle. Pokemon itself made me happy, yeah, but when I think of my best memories with Pokemon, I think of context. I think of playing Pokemon Emerald with my friends at summer camp, eating ice cream and comparing teams. I think of when I started a group at my college for everyone to trade and battle together. I think of when a kid in my elementary school taught me how to clone my Feraligatr in the schoolyard after class was over. The toys and games were just one part of it, one thing attached to it. The people and places were integral. The people and places were the glue holding it all together. As long as we put all of our happiness inside of things and things alone, I think we'll always be a little let down. But I also think that when we start seeing happiness as a full, complex thing that comes from life itself, with all the little pieces and parts it contains, we can start seeing what really matters. And maybe we can make today better than yesterday. I've literally been underwater for about like 3 minutes now. And I'm trying to remember how I get back to the surface. I thought there was like a little reaction command where it would be like, okay, the light is shimmering down from above. Would you like to dive up? But what's weird is I had this exact problem when I played the game as a child. Like I would get stuck diving and undiving.
Yeah.
I guess I just live here now. I have to... I don't even know where Sidopolis is at this point. Okay, hold on.
Everything was fine, but they had to clear the building until the fire department could check it out. And by the time everyone filed back in afterward, there were literally dealers in the vendor hall.
Can I save underwater?
I don't know anything about Gen 3.
I thought you could, like, intuit this stuff. I thought you were a Pokemon master.
No.